David, shepherd, warrior.
In the ancient lands of Judah, nestled among rolling hills and verdant valleys, lived a young shepherd named David. He was the youngest of 8 sons of Jesse, a humble man from Bethlehem. While his older brothers were strong warriors, serving in King Saul's army, David spent his days tending sheep, guiding them through rocky pastures, and protecting them from wild beasts. David wasn't just a shepherd, he was a musician too. With a heart full of devotion, he often played his lyre, composing beautiful psalms that echoed through the quiet fields, praising God for his creation. One day, a great fear swept across Israel. The Philistine army had gathered for war, and among their ranks stood a giant warrior named Goliath, who challenged anyone in Israel to a one-on-one battle. For 40 days, Goliath mocked the Israelite army, boasting and daring anyone to face him. King Saul and his seasoned warriors were paralyzed with fear, none daring to step forward. David, sent by his father to deliver provisions to his brothers at the front, heard Goliath's taunts. His heart burned with indignation. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? He declared. His eldest brother, Eliab, scorned him, accusing David of pride and neglecting his sheep. But David stood firm, his conviction unwavering. Word of David's courage reached King Saul. Though skeptical of a mere shepherd boy, the king agreed to meet him. "Let no man's heart fail because of him," David told Saul. "Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." Saul offered David his own armor, but it was too heavy and cumbersome for the young shepherd. "I cannot go with these, for I have not tested them," David explained, laying aside the heavy bronze. Instead, David chose 5 smooth stones from the riverbed and placed them in his shepherd's pouch. With his sling in hand and his staff, he walked towards the giant. Goliath, seeing a mere youth approaching, scoffed. "Am I a dog, that you come to me with sticks?" he roared, cursing David by his gods. David, undeterred, responded with unwavering faith. "You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give the dead bodies of the host of the Philistines this day to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And that all this assembly may know that the Lord saves, not with sword and spear. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand." As Goliath advanced, David ran swiftly to meet him. Reaching into his pouch, he pulled out a stone, placed it in his sling, and hurled it with all his might. The stone struck Goliath squarely on his forehead, sinking deep. The giant staggered, then fell face down to the ground, defeated. David then ran and stood over Goliath, taking the giant's own sword. With a swift movement, he drew it from its sheath and cut off Goliath's head. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they turned and fled in terror. The Israelite army, emboldened by David's victory, pursued them, driving them back to their borders. David returned to Jerusalem, a hero, carrying Goliath's head. His act of faith had not only saved Israel, but had also inspired a nation. From that day forward, David's fame grew. He became a trusted warrior in King Saul's army, renowned for his courage and skill. However, King Saul grew jealous of David's popularity, attempting to harm him multiple times. David, always respectful of God's anointed, refused to raise a hand against Saul, even when he had the chance. Instead, David chose to flee, trusting in God's protection, and waited patiently for the Lord's timing. After Saul's death, David was anointed king of Judah, and later, all of Israel. He established Jerusalem as the capital, a city that would become known as the City of David. As king, David led Israel with wisdom and strength. He brought the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, further solidifying the nation's spiritual center. He was a just ruler, deeply committed to God, though he faced his own struggles and made mistakes. Yet, he always returned to God with a repentant heart, seeking forgiveness and guidance. David's reign was marked by both military victories and spiritual leadership, expanding Israel's borders and establishing a legacy that would echo through generations. His story is a testament to the power of faith, humility, and courage. It teaches us that true strength comes not from our own might, but from our trust in God. No matter how small or insignificant we may feel, with God, we can overcome any giant in our lives. David, the humble shepherd, became a mighty king, proving that God often chooses the most unexpected individuals to fulfill his greatest plans. The moral of David's story is that faith, courage, and obedience to God can overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges, and that true leadership is rooted in a humble and devoted heart.
Joshua and the walls of Jericho.
In the ancient land of Canaan, after Moses led his people from Egypt, a new leader arose, Joshua, strong and faithful. He was tasked with guiding the Israelites into the promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey. But first, they faced a formidable challenge. Before them lay the great city of Jericho, a city surrounded by massive impenetrable walls that reached towards the sky. The people of Jericho were mighty warriors, and their city was a stronghold, seemingly impossible to conquer. Joshua, a man of unwavering faith, knew that human strength alone would not suffice. He prayed to God, seeking guidance and wisdom for the task ahead. God heard his prayer and revealed a plan, unlike any military strategy known to man. God instructed Joshua to have his armed men march around the city once a day for 6 days. 7 priests were to carry trumpets made of ram's horns, marching ahead of the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred chest symbolizing God's presence. On the 7th day, the command was different. On this day, they were to march around Jericho, not once, but 7 times. As they marched the 7th time, the priests would blow a long blast on their trumpets, and all the people were to shout with a great roar. Joshua gathered his people, delivering God's precise instructions. His face was resolute, his voice calm and confident, instilling trust in the hearts of the Israelites. Despite the unconventional nature of the plan, their faith in Joshua, and more importantly, in God, spurred them on. Among the inhabitants of Jericho lived a woman named Rahab. She was not an Israelite, but she had heard tales of their God's mighty deeds, how he had parted the Red Sea and defeated powerful kings. Before the siege began, Joshua had sent 2 spies into Jericho to scout the land. Rahab, despite the danger to herself, hid them from the king's men, recognizing their mission and believing in the power of their God. She made a covenant with the spies, asking them to spare her family when the city fell, in exchange for her help. They agreed, instructing her to tie a scarlet cord in her window as a sign, and to gather her family inside her house. And so, on the first day, the silent march began, the armed men, followed by the priests with their trumpets. Then the Ark of the Covenant, and finally the rear guard, circled the mighty walls of Jericho. The people watched, a mixture of awe and trepidation in their hearts. Day after day, for 6 days, the procession continued. The only sounds were the measured footsteps and the occasional shofar blasts, a haunting melody that filled the air. The people of Jericho must have watched from their walls, confused and perhaps mocking this strange ritual. Joshua remained steadfast, his faith an unyielding beacon for his people. He reminded them to trust in God's timing and his power, to remain silent until the appointed moment, for the victory belonged to the Lord. On the 7th day, as the sun began its ascent, the Israelites rose early. The anticipation was palpable, a hush falling over the camp. They knew this day would be different. This was the day of God's promised intervention. They marched around the city, not once, but 7 times, their footsteps echoing with a renewed sense of purpose. The sound of the trumpets grew more insistent, each blast a drumbeat of destiny. Rahab, with her family gathered safely within her house, watched from her window, the scarlet cord a vibrant symbol of hope against the ancient stone. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and unwavering trust in the promise made to her. Finally, after the 7th circuit, a long, sustained blast from the trumpets pierced the air. Joshua, his voice amplified by divine authority, cried out, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." And at his command, a mighty roar erupted from the throats of thousands of Israelites, a sound unlike any earthly battle cry. It was a shout of faith, of obedience, and of absolute conviction in God's power. And then, a miracle. The colossal walls of Jericho, those seemingly unconquerable fortifications, began to tremble. Great cracks appeared, dust billowed, and with a thunderous roar, they collapsed flat. The way into the city was now open, laid bare for the Israelites. The only structure left, standing amidst the rubble, was Rahab's house, marked by the scarlet cord, a testament to God's faithfulness and her own courageous belief. Joshua commanded his men to go into the city, but to spare Rahab and her family, honoring the covenant made by the spies. And so, they brought her and all her relatives out, placing them in safety outside the camp of Israel. The city of Jericho was taken, not by human might, but by divine intervention. It was a profound lesson for the Israelites, reminding them that with God, all things are possible, and obedience brings victory. Joshua ensured that Rahab and her family were welcomed among the Israelites. Rahab, once an outsider, became a part of God's chosen people, a testament to God's mercy and inclusion. Her story became a vital part of Israel's history, highlighting that faith can be found in unexpected places, and God's plan often extends beyond the boundaries we create. The events at Jericho instilled deep reverence for God in the hearts of the Israelites. It cemented Joshua's leadership and demonstrated God's unwavering commitment to his promises. From that day forward, the Israelites understood that their strength lay not in their weapons or their numbers, but in their complete trust and obedience to the Lord their God. The story of Jericho serves as a powerful reminder that there are times in our lives when we face challenges that seem insurmountable, like towering walls blocking our path. In such moments, human logic and conventional solutions may fail us. It is then that we are called to place our trust completely in a higher power, in God's wisdom and his unconventional ways. Like Joshua, we must seek divine guidance, Listen for his instructions and obey them, even if they seem illogical or strange to our limited understanding. And like Rahab, we must cultivate faith, recognizing God's power even when we are outsiders, and act on that belief, trusting in his promises of protection and deliverance. The walls of Jericho did not fall because of swords or spears, but because of faith, obedience, and the mighty power of God. It teaches us that true victory comes not from our own strength, but from aligning ourselves with the divine. So when faced with your own walls of Jericho, remember to pray, listen, obey, and shout with faith. For God's power can bring down any obstacle, paving the way for his promised blessings in your life. The lesson of Jericho endures. Trust in God completely, obey his commands, and witness the miraculous ways he makes the impossible possible.
Samson, a tale of strength and choices.
In the ancient lands of Israel, a time of trial and challenge, lived a young man named Samson. From his very birth, a special destiny was laid upon him, for he was to be a Nazarite, set apart for God's purpose. The angel of the Lord had appeared to his parents, promising them a son who would begin to deliver Israel from the hand of the Philistines. A key part of this covenant was that a razor should never touch his head, for his strength would reside in his uncut hair. As Samson grew, so did his strength, a gift unlike any other. He could tear a young lion apart with his bare hands and break ropes as if they were mere threads. His feats became legendary, bringing awe and fear to those who witnessed them. Yet, despite his immense power and divine calling, Samson was often led by his own desires. He sought companionship outside his people, falling for women who did not share his faith or understanding of his sacred vow. One day, Samson traveled to Timnah and saw a Philistine woman. He desired her greatly and insisted to his parents that they arrange for him to marry her, despite their warnings. On his way to Timnah, a young lion roared at him. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon Samson, and he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, as one would tear a young goat. Later, he returned to Timnah to take the woman. He turned aside to look at the lion's carcass, and there he saw a swarm of bees and honey inside its body. He took some and ate it, sharing with his parents without telling them where it came from. At the wedding feast, Samson posed a riddle to 30 Philistine companions. Out of the eater, something to eat; out of the strong, something sweet. He offered them a wager of 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. For 3 days, they could not solve the riddle. On the 4th day, they pressured Samson's wife to coax the answer from him, threatening to burn her and her family's house. Samson, tired of her weeping, finally told her the answer. She, in turn, revealed it to her people. Before the sun set, the Philistines came to Samson, saying, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" Furious, Samson knew his wife had betrayed him. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon, struck down 30 Philistine men, took their plunder, and gave the clothes to those who had explained the riddle. He returned to his father's house in a rage, and his wife was given to his companion, the one who had been best man at the wedding. This act of betrayal fueled Samson's anger even further. Later, during harvest time, Samson returned, bringing a young goat as a gift. intending to see his wife. Her father refused him, saying, "I thought for sure you hated her, so I gave her to your companion." In his vengeance, Samson caught 300 foxes, tied them tail to tail in pairs, and put a torch between each pair of tails. He set the torches ablaze and released the foxes into the Philistines' grain fields, vineyards, and olive groves, burning everything. The Philistines asked, "Who did this?" They were told, "Samson, because his Philistine wife was given to his best man, so the Philistines went up and burned her and her father to death." Samson declared, "Since you've acted like this, I won't stop until I get my revenge on you." He attacked them viciously, slaughtering many, and then went down to live in a cave in the rock of Etam. The Philistines came up and camped in Judah, spreading out near Lehi. The men of Judah asked, "Why have you come up against us?" They answered, "We have come to take Samson prisoner and do to him as he has done to us." 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cave in the rock of Etam and said to Samson, "Don't you realize that the Philistines are rulers over us? What have you done to us?" Samson replied, "I merely did to them what they did to me." They said to him, "We've come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines." He said, "Swear to me that you yourselves will not kill me." They promised him, "No, we will only tie you up and hand you over to them. We will not kill you." So they tied him with 2 new ropes and led him up from the rock. As he approached Lehi, the Philistines came shouting against him. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. The ropes on his arms became like charred flax, and the bindings dropped from his hands. He found a fresh jawbone of a donkey. He grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men. Then Samson said, "With a donkey's jawbone I have made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone I have killed 1,000 men." After he finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone and called that place Ramath Lehi, meaning Jawbone Hill. He was very thirsty and cried out to the Lord, "You have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst?" Then God opened up the hollow place in Lehi, and water came out of it. When Samson drank, his strength returned, and he revived. He judged Israel for 20 years in the days of the Philistines. Later, Samson fell in love with a woman named Delilah in the valley of Sorek. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, "See if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength." For a high price, Delilah agreed. 3 times she pressed him for the secret, and 3 times Samson gave her false answers, making light of his sacred vow. Each time, Delilah would try to overpower him with Philistine soldiers, only to be met with his incredible strength. Yet, she persisted, day after day, nagging him until he was weary to the point of death. Finally, Samson, worn down by her relentless questions, revealed his true secret. "No razor has ever touched my head, because I have been a Nazarite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me." Delilah realized he had told her everything. She sent for the Philistine rulers, who brought the money. While Samson slept on her lap, she called for a man to shave off the 7 braids of his hair. His strength left him. When she cried, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you," he awoke, thinking he would shake himself free as before, but the Lord had left him. The Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza. They bound him with bronze shackles, and made him grind grain in the prison. But his hair, though shorn, began to grow again, a symbol of hope and a chance for repentance. During a great festival to their god Dagon, the Philistine rulers gathered to offer a great sacrifice and celebrate Samson's capture. They brought Samson out of the prison to entertain them. mocking the man who once terrorized them. Samson asked the servant guiding him, "Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them." The temple was crowded, filled with thousands of Philistines, including all their rulers. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just this once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Then Samson reached out and grasped the 2 central pillars on which the temple rested, bracing himself against them. With his right hand on one, and his left on the other, he pushed with all his might. "Let me die with the Philistines," he shouted, and the temple collapsed, bringing down the rulers and all the people in it. Thus Samson killed many more when he died than while he lived. His brothers and his whole family went down to get his body. They brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah his father. He had judged Israel for 20 years. Samson's story is a powerful reminder that even those greatly blessed by God must remain vigilant. His personal choices, driven by impulse and desire, often led to suffering and consequences, not just for himself, but for others.
Joseph and the coat of many colors.
In ancient times, in the land of Canaan, lived a man named Jacob who had 12 sons. Among them, his heart held a special affection for Joseph, the son of his old age, showering him with love and favor above all his brothers. This deep affection was evident when Jacob gifted Joseph a magnificent multicolored coat, a symbol of his unique love and Joseph's esteemed position within the family. However, this special treatment, especially the splendid coat, fueled a bitter jealousy in Joseph's elder brothers. Their envy festered as Joseph, in his youthful innocence, shared 2 vivid dreams. In the first, he dreamt their sheaves of grain bowed down to his own, and in the second, the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed before him. These dreams, which clearly foretold Joseph's future authority over them, only intensified their resentment and hatred, confirming their fears that he sought to rule over them. One day, while Joseph's brothers were out tending their father's flocks in Shechem, Jacob sent Joseph to check on their well-being. As Joseph approached, his brothers saw him from afar, and their festering hatred boiled over into a sinister plot. They conspired to kill him, declaring, "Here comes the dreamer. Let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns, and say that a wild animal devoured him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." Reuben, the eldest brother, had a change of heart and intervened, secretly planning to rescue Joseph later. He convinced his brothers not to shed blood directly, suggesting instead they throw Joseph into a pit in the wilderness. The brothers agreed, and when Joseph arrived, they cruelly stripped him of his beloved colorful coat and cast him into an empty cistern. Shortly after, a caravan of Ishmaelite traders passed by on their way to Egypt. Judah, another brother, proposed a less violent, yet equally heartless, alternative: to sell Joseph into slavery, rather than leave him to die in the pit. The brothers agreed, pulling Joseph out of the cistern and selling him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. To cover their wicked deed, the brothers took Joseph's magnificent coat, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the coat in its blood. They brought the blood-stained garment back to their father Jacob, who immediately recognized it. Overwhelmed with grief, Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son Joseph for many days. Believing a wild animal had devoured him, his sorrow was profound, and he refused to be comforted. Meanwhile, Joseph was taken to Egypt and sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. Despite his traumatic ordeal, the Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered in Potiphar's household. Potiphar recognized Joseph's diligence and the blessing of the Lord upon all he did, entrusting him with the management of his entire estate, overseeing everything he owned. Joseph, being handsome and well-built, soon caught the eye of Potiphar's wife. She persistently tried to seduce him, day after day. However, Joseph, with unwavering integrity and a deep respect for God and his master, consistently refused her advances, stating, "How can I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" One day, when Joseph was alone in the house, Potiphar's wife seized him by his cloak. He fled, leaving his garment in her hand. Infuriated by his rejection, she falsely accused him of attempted assault. Potiphar, enraged by his wife's account, had Joseph thrown into prison, where he remained for a long time. Even in prison, the Lord was with Joseph. He found favor in the eyes of the prison warden, who, seeing Joseph's integrity and the Lord's blessing on his work, put him in charge of all the other prisoners and everything that was done in the prison. Joseph's administrative skills and trustworthiness shone even in the bleakest circumstances. While in prison, Joseph met Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker, who had offended their master and were imprisoned. Both had troubling dreams on the same night. Joseph, by God's grace, interpreted their dreams accurately. He told the cupbearer that in 3 days he would be restored to his position, and the baker that in 3 days he would be impaled. Joseph asked the cupbearer to remember him when he was restored, but the cupbearer forgot him for 2 full years. After 2 years, Pharaoh himself had 2 disturbing dreams. In the first, he saw 7 fat cows eaten by 7 lean cows. In the second, he saw 7 healthy heads of grain devoured by 7 thin, scorched heads. Troubled, Pharaoh summoned all his wise men and magicians, but none could interpret his dreams. Then, the chief cupbearer suddenly remembered Joseph and told Pharaoh about the young Hebrew in prison who could interpret dreams. Pharaoh immediately sent for Joseph. Joseph, relying on God's wisdom, interpreted Pharaoh's dreams. The 7 fat cows and healthy grain represented 7 years of abundant harvest, and the 7 lean cows and scorched grain represented 7 years of severe famine that would follow. Joseph then advised Pharaoh to appoint a wise and discerning man to oversee the land of Egypt, to collect and store 1/5 of the produce during the 7 years of plenty, and to save it for the 7 years of famine. This strategic plan would ensure Egypt's survival during the lean years. Pharaoh, recognizing God's spirit in Joseph and the wisdom of his counsel, declared, "Can we find anyone else like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" He immediately appointed Joseph as his second in command, making him ruler over all of Egypt. Joseph was given Pharaoh's signet ring, fine linen clothes, a gold chain, and a chariot. Joseph, now 30 years old, began his work. He traveled throughout Egypt, meticulously overseeing the collection and storage of grain during the 7 years of abundance. He stored such vast quantities that he stopped keeping records, as the amount was beyond measure, like the sand of the sea. As Joseph had foretold, the 7 years of famine began, affecting not only Egypt, but all the surrounding lands. But in Egypt, there was food because of Joseph's foresight. When the famine grew severe, the people cried out to Pharaoh for food, and he told them, "Go to Joseph, and do whatever he tells you." The famine was so severe that people from all surrounding countries came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, for the famine was raging throughout the world. Even Joseph's own brothers, driven by hunger, made the long journey from Canaan to Egypt to buy food. When Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down before him with their faces to the ground, fulfilling the very dreams Joseph had shared in his youth. Joseph recognized them immediately, but they did not recognize him, transformed as he was into an Egyptian official. He remembered his dreams and spoke harshly to them, accusing them of being spies. Joseph tested his brothers, demanding they bring their youngest brother Benjamin to Egypt to prove their honesty. After several interactions, and seeing their distress and repentance for their past actions, Joseph could no longer control his emotions. He sent everyone else out of the room and revealed himself to his brothers, weeping loudly. "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt," he declared. His brothers were terrified and speechless, but Joseph reassured them, saying, "Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." Joseph explained that God had sent him ahead of them to preserve many lives and to make them a great nation. He emphasized that it was not they who sent him here, but God, who had made him father to Pharaoh, lord of all his household, and ruler throughout Egypt. He urged them to return to Canaan and bring their father, Jacob, and all their families to Egypt, promising to provide for them during the remaining years of famine. Overjoyed and filled with remorse, his brothers embraced him. Pharaoh, hearing that Joseph's brothers had arrived, was pleased and instructed Joseph to bring his entire family to Egypt, promising them the best of the land. So, Joseph provided his brothers with wagons, provisions for their journey, and new clothes, and sent them back to Canaan with instructions to quickly bring their father and all their households. When Joseph's brothers returned to their father Jacob in Canaan and told him that Joseph was still alive and was ruler over all Egypt, Jacob's heart almost stopped. He could not believe them at first, but when he saw the wagons Joseph had sent to carry him, his spirit revived, and he exclaimed, "My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." So Jacob and his entire family, 70 people in all, journeyed to Egypt. Joseph went out to meet his father in Goshen, and when they met, Joseph embraced him and wept for a long time. Jacob said to Joseph, "Now I can die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." Joseph settled his family in the fertile land of Goshen, where they prospered greatly. He continued to serve Pharaoh faithfully, wisely managing the famine and ensuring the well-being of both the Egyptians and his own family. Joseph lived to see his great-grandchildren, a testament to God's enduring blessings. Years later, as Jacob lay on his deathbed, he blessed Joseph's 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, giving them a special place among his own sons. He also reaffirmed Joseph's favored status and spoke prophetic words about the future of all his sons.
Moses, the unseen path.
In the ancient land of Midian, far from the grand palaces of Egypt, lived a humble shepherd named Moses. He had once been a prince, raised in luxury, but a twist of fate and a heart full of justice led him to flee into the desert, seeking a quieter life. One day, as Moses tended his flock near Mount Horeb, he noticed a peculiar sight, a bush burning brightly, yet not consumed by the flames. Intrigued, he drew closer, his heart filled with a mixture of awe and trepidation. From within the fire, a voice, deep and resonant, called out his name, "Moses, Moses." It was the voice of God, who commanded him to remove his sandals, for the ground he stood upon was holy. God revealed his divine purpose to Moses, to return to Egypt and demand the release of his people, the Israelites, from slavery under Pharaoh. Moses, though hesitant and full of doubt, listened intently. Moses, a man of profound humility, questioned his own ability. "Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" he asked, feeling the immense weight of the task. God reassured him, promising, "I will be with you." He also granted Moses miraculous powers to demonstrate his presence and authority to both Pharaoh and the Israelites. Moses' brother, Aaron, an eloquent speaker, was appointed by God to assist him. Together, they would face the mighty Pharaoh and deliver God's message. Upon their return to Egypt, Moses and Aaron bravely approached Pharaoh, relaying God's command, "Let my people go." Pharaoh, a proud and stubborn ruler, scoffed at their words. To prove God's power, Aaron cast down his staff, and it transformed into a serpent. Pharaoh's magicians, attempting to mimic the miracle, also turned their staffs into serpents, but Aaron's serpent devoured theirs. Still, Pharaoh's heart remained hardened. God then unleashed a series of 10 devastating plagues upon Egypt, each one more severe than the last. The first plague turned all the water in Egypt into blood, causing great distress and suffering among the Egyptians, but Pharaoh refused to relent. Next came swarms of frogs, covering the land, hopping into homes and beds, yet Pharaoh's stubbornness persisted. Then came gnats, followed by flies, tormenting the people and livestock, but still, Pharaoh would not free the Israelites. A dreadful pestilence struck the livestock, killing countless animals. Despite this heavy loss, Pharaoh's will remained unbroken. Boils erupted on the skin of Egyptians and their animals, causing painful sores. This plague brought immense suffering, yet Pharaoh still refused to yield. Then a terrible hailstorm, unlike anything seen before in Egypt, rained down fire and ice, destroying crops and killing people and animals in the fields. Locusts swarmed the land, devouring every green thing that the hail had left. The land became barren, yet Pharaoh's resolve was unshaken. Darkness, thick and palpable, enveloped Egypt for 3 days. A darkness so profound that people could not see each other. Yet Pharaoh would not budge. Finally came the 10th and most terrible plague, the death of the firstborn. Only the houses of the Israelites, marked with the blood of a lamb, were spared by the angel of death. This devastating plague broke Pharaoh's will. In his grief and fear, he finally commanded Moses and Aaron to take the Israelites and leave Egypt immediately. With haste, the Israelites departed. But Pharaoh, regretting his decision, soon pursued them with his entire army, trapping them at the Red Sea. Faced with the mighty Egyptian army behind them, and the vast sea before them, the Israelites cried out in despair. Moses, however, remained steadfast in his faith. At God's command, Moses raised his staff over the Red Sea, and a mighty wind parted the waters, creating a dry path through the sea. The Israelites walked across on dry ground, marveling at God's miraculous intervention, escaping the grasp of Pharaoh's army. As the last Israelite crossed, the Egyptian army, hot on their heels, entered the parted sea. Then God commanded Moses to stretch out his hand once more. The waters rushed back, engulfing Pharaoh and his chariots, bringing an end to their pursuit. The Israelites were truly free. Moses led his people through the wilderness for 40 years, a journey filled with both challenges and divine provisions. God provided manna from heaven and water from a rock. At Mount Sinai, God gave Moses the 10 Commandments, a sacred covenant to guide the Israelites in righteousness and justice. Moses, though he never entered the promised land himself, faithfully led his people to its very border, fulfilling his divine mission. His life stands as a testament to faith, obedience, and perseverance in the face of daunting challenges. The story of Moses reminds us that even when we feel inadequate, God can use us for his mighty purposes. It teaches us the power of faith, the importance of listening to divine guidance, and that true freedom comes from following God's will, even when the path is unseen and difficult.